Hi, Philipp.
Hi, Marwan.
We're very happy to host you in our first podcast.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
We consider you one of the gurus on Egypt's ground. Let's start with a brief introduction. We want to know who is Philipp as a person.
Maybe start at the start. I was born in South Bavaria, very close to the Austrian border. I grew up in northern Bavaria, and after college I moved to Berlin in the early 90s. And maybe most people know that the wall just came down, the Iron Curtain. So Berlin was a very free city and there were a lot of things happening. And yeah, it was a very inspiring and very rich like very interesting time in Berlin back then. So I applied for a university in Berlin. I was a guest in the University of the Arts in Berlin. And I did several internships in Berlin with advertising agencies, graphic design agencies, museum. And then I was taken in Leipzig. One of my bosses at the agency suggested to apply for Leipzig. They had very good teachers, very good professors. Zion was very famous, or Rudi Bauer. So, and they just restructured the basic studies. So I went into Leipzig in 2000.
What was your childhood like?
My parents are both Protestant priests. So my mother is also a priest, which was not very normal at that time. She had to fight a bit to get recognized in her role or in her job or in her commission or in her responsibility. So it was interesting for me to see how she reached her goals and to join her with this. And my father was a military priest, and later we moved, he was a community priest. And this is where the problem started a bit. As a son of a community priest, you're a bit exposed to all the people. And I tried to do my best, but at some point I also rebelled a bit against the expectations from the community. So then I was a bit of a wild boy for some time.
Okay. How did your story originate? As Philipp that started being into education and then into design education?
Yeah, from my childhood, I liked very much to draw, and I think my grandparents and my mother encouraged me also a bit in this, or they enjoyed my drawings, and also with my classmates, they enjoyed the drawings. So I saw that something you can do with arts or design. And yeah, we always designed also small newspapers or student leaflets or stuff like this, or small comics. So I also liked reading comics a lot. I learned reading with the help of Asterix and these kind of comics. And later on, my parents suggested that I would be a teacher. So in my family, there were also many people like priests or teachers or professors, so this was a bit inherited maybe to go in this direction, but I was more interested in being a designer. And yeah, in a way, finally, I was able to combine both. I did not know what design is. I knew what the activity or the agency of design is, to communicate something to others or to enjoy others or to show something to others. So I was always drawing in school, but for us back then we had a class art, like the history of arts and these things. So I did not really know what design is at that point. I visited, after I finished college, I briefly visited an institute in a neighboring village city for art and design, and they also showed us examples of typography and advertising and graphic design. So then I got an idea for what to apply and in which direction to go. But it took me a few years, which I do not regret. I think I profited also a lot from studying cultural studies and anthropology and these things.
What was your first impression when you knew that a design business is available, or there's a part of design that you could explore more? يعني typography and designing posters and exhibition design. What was your first impression when you knew this was a thing that you could study?
I remember also in school, my art teacher asked me to do posters and leaflets for theater plays or for things like this. So I already knew you can do something with this. Later on, I learned how much you can actually do with this. I remember that I always had to help my parents to get dressed or all these things, or to build my room in different ways. So I think there are certain things that I always enjoyed and liked and was interested in, and step by step I made this into a profession, or I learned that this is actually a profession.
Mm-hmm. How was your journey as a design student, then a designer in business, then becoming an educator?
As I said, I did these internships, and I was also considering to take it step by step without studying. But then I was very happy to come to Leipzig, and I also learned that Leipzig, this city, has a huge history and legacy in printing and books. And this, I was very interested to get into this field and to learn more about it. And also, my impression back then was that in Berlin, the art schools were quite artistic or very commercial. In Leipzig, craft was also a big thing. So to really understand what you are doing and to really have also historical knowledge, but also the fine craft of typography, but also in many other fields, this was really, to understand what you are doing, this was really great in Leipzig.
Who were the people that you, when you were coming up as a designer or a junior designer, who were the people you looked up to?
I mean, when I came to Leipzig, I visited also a class with Hildegard Korger. She passed away 2 years ago. She was a legend in type design also. I used her typefaces a lot. And she was a late professor, and I learned calligraphy by her. So I visited her each Saturday and learned the details of calligraphy. So I enjoyed this very much. But then also Zyan, we had them from the first class of our studies, and they were famous back then, especially in Berlin. You could not avoid to see their graphic design in the streets. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of posters, and they were a bit the new hot graphic design. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed very much learning with them. It's Detlef Fiedler and Daniela Haufe. They were expecting a lot of hard work, so it was not always easy, but when I look back, I enjoy it a lot. And here's one poster. This was when I just came to Leipzig. Back then there was a tradition that the newcomers prepare a party and they take over the space and decorate the space. And here we used, I did this also under the supervision of Hildegard Korger. And so we see here a bit of traditional Leipzig typography, so very typography based, and maybe we can also see a few works of her. But also Zyan with the neon color and with the loud noise. So it's not that I'm so super proud if I look at this poster now, but it was early work that, I can still see it, it's fine.
What was it like to work with your first client?
With my first client? Soon when I started to study in Leipzig, a friend of mine went to Hildesheim, which is quite in the center of Germany, and he studied creative writing. And they started a literature magazine, and they asked me to take over the typography of this literature magazine. I mean, I had some, also my father asked me to design a logo. I mean, like family clients. This was a friend client. But yeah, I got a little bit of payment, but it was a very interesting experience to design this literature magazine over several years, and it was quite successful. So it was also covered by larger media. Of course, as a young student, you cannot ask for huge amounts of money, but it was interesting to learn how to collaborate and how to bargain and to see when you have to compromise. And yeah, it was a very interesting collaboration with the literature magazine.
Okay.
I mean, I had also clients, of course, in the agency, but I had no direct contact with the clients back then when I did my internships.
Yes, of course. How was the transition between you being a designer then going into the education of design, and why did you take the route of becoming an educator?
I started. I mean, maybe we can come back a bit to the student years, but I started teaching in 2011, I think. I was asked by colleagues, we have in Leipzig, in this Academy of Visual Arts, they have a huge letterpress workshop with old typefaces and also large wood typefaces. And back then I started teaching 2 times per week in this university, and yeah, it was also not super well paid, but it was a very interesting experience, and I just wanted to see how it works, if I'm able to do this. And I think the feedback from the students and also from the colleagues was quite good, so I got more confident also in teaching design.
Then now we could maybe go into your work more and see some cases that you worked on.
Yeah, so maybe here we can see one work, 2004. So this was already 4 years after I started studying, and it took quite a while until it was published. So I guess it took 2 years until it was published. But here we can see maybe an approach. We looked into the history of Leipzig traditional typography, but also to give it a twist with contemporary design. So I think the concept here was it was a manual for students to learn more about the academy. And our idea here was to let the students speak on the cover. So the students have a voice in this, but also in the composition and in the choice of colors. I think it was a bit contemporary, but it also had a clear relation. It was also the test print was an inspiration, like the test sheets of the offset printing. And we developed a system with certain angles and certain lines to have a floor plan or a city map or the routes of the studies. And it also got a prize. It won the award as one of the best books of 2004 or something. So this was also something that we were a bit proud of. So this is also an old thing. And then one other line here, our theory professor, Mrs. Blume, she asked me to research about the Gutenberg Award of the city of Leipzig. So this is an award for book designers and type designers and illustrators and companies from this field. And so we did a long, deep research about in the Museum of Book about the Gutenberg laureates. And it was very interesting to find out more about their work, about the history and the legacy of their works. And then we designed this book about the history of this award in 2004, and with the help of André Grau and Günter Kolbose. It's a quite humble and decent work, but we developed here a bit of an administrative system that maybe reminds of the GDR time. So this prize was mainly in the GDR, in a socialist system, but also here we can see a galaxy of stars. So there's an idea of a Gutenberg galaxy, and here we can see some of the designers who were awarded. So Bernhard Klemke with his illustrations. Albert Kappa was a professor at this university and a researcher and published very interesting books. Or Jan Tschichold is on the right side. He was very influential for the history of Swiss and, I guess, penguin books and worldwide typography. And on the left side we have Solomon Tillingarter, a Russian, and also like the Russian avant-garde, very interesting people. And Hildegard Korger, who I mentioned before, she knew also all these people, so I heard also a bit of background stories, and it was very interesting to get this deep research, and maybe this is a line that we can come back to later on.
Yes.
And this is just one example of this collaboration with creative writers, with young students of literature or of writing. And here, apart from this magazine, we also designed, for example, small booklets. And here you can see a bit detailed typography and the cover. Back then, suddenly the painters from my academy, they got world famous. And I was happy that David Schnell, who I like his work very, very much, and he was generous enough to give me the rights to print his painting on the cover. So it was a very nice combination of visual art, typography, literature. I think I still like this small work.
It's really nice.
Yeah, maybe another line of work with Zyan. We had also one time we did in the Bauhaus Dessau a huge festival, Kurt Weill festival, a huge. We changed the whole room. We did a Kurt Weill karaoke. We had huge interventions in the space in this Bauhaus building, and yeah, it was very interesting to study with Zyan. And this was one example of one of the first exhibition designs. So here we collaborated with Eugen Blume. He was the curator or the leader of Hamburger Bahnhof, a large museum of contemporary art in Berlin. So one of Germany's very important contemporary museums. And he curated this, and we worked together, and he gave us some ideas. And we developed, in German, it's the word Lehrkörper. There's no direct translation, but it would maybe be body of teaching staff. And here for each teacher, there is one cabinet. And then to the teachers of my academy, there are also John Cage, Beuys, Buckminster Fuller, so very famous artists and anti-teachers from the history. And yeah, it was a very interesting interactive installation with so many details and so many, you could move the cabinets, you could look into them. So maybe here we can see how, it was we painted all of them black, and then you could really play with this, and it was a very, I liked also the experience of this exhibition design. I liked very much.
Was this the type was printed? Was printed on it, or
it was glued? So it was these adhesive letters that get cutted out of thin plastic, and then you can glue them on this.
Yes. Okay. And your role in this project was mainly, what was the biggest thing you did in this project was the type?
So we were sitting in the beginning together we visited Berlin, and we visited the Hamburger Bahnhof Museum, and Eugen Blume gave us a tour, and we were brainstorming with him. And then one of us came up with the idea of these cabinets. And back then, these cabinets, they were used in the GDR, but at that time everyone wanted a new IKEA or a different. So these cabinets were super cheap, and you could we bought them super cheap and painted all of them white. And then I remember I was sitting the whole summer with mainly Kai Bachmann, who later was one of my partners in design, and Jakob Kirch, who was also one of my studio partners later on. Basically, I mean, there were the whole class was involved, but we figured out the whole setup, the basic rules and sizes of the typography. I mean, yeah, it was a group work of the whole class, but I was pretty much involved in the general setup. But this cage here, this one in the front, this was my cabinet. So I was getting into the work of John Cage and his legacy, and it's basically about silence. And there was a movie about his 344 piece. It's a famous art performance. Yeah, and there were so many details. You can open everything and you can listen. If you open the bottom part, music comes out. So a piece that lasts for 48 hours or something, someone playing it super slow, and then suddenly it's silent again. So it was, yeah, so I got this piece here was fine-tuning.
Yes, it's amazing. The detail on it is huge.
Yeah, I liked it very much. And of course, this is only possible when so many people collaborate. And
so you enjoyed working with other designers on big projects?
Yes, I definitely always enjoyed collaborating with other designers. Yes, and this is one thing that goes through my whole career up to now, that I always like to collaborate. And I think complex projects like this, you can hardly do them on your own. You need to collaborate, and then it's the question, how do you collaborate, in which hierarchies or in which role distribution? Yes, but I liked generally very much to collaborate. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. This is amazing. I can't stop looking at it.
Thank you. There was also here, maybe this is a point that leads to the next thing. This we put it on top. So there's a top gallery, and we put it Wunderkammer, a cabinet of curiosities. So this is like the old museums, or the history of museum. It started with collectors, private collectors, like kings collecting something and putting the things together in a weird way. So just a weird collection of objects. And yeah, this was done by Tobias Wenig. Toby, he also taught in the GOC briefly. He was mainly focusing on this part together with one other colleague. And yeah, and this cabinet of curiosities maybe leads over to my diploma project. So I also studied briefly with Rüdi Bauer, and there were also some interesting projects which are not included here. But yeah, I wrote my thesis, but then it was I faced some problems doing my practical master. And so by accident, Zyan organized a workshop with a famous photographer, and we had the assignment to go out 2 hours and photograph anything. And I just went by a window and saw two, I don't know, these German dwarfs. There are these garden dwarfs in the window, and I just photographed them, and the neighbor came out and told me, look up and knock on the door, maybe it's interesting. And so I entered this apartment, and then it was a huge collection. It was a small apartment, but every room was completely fully staffed with stuff of different quality and different times. So some of it is cheap stuff, some of it is somehow interesting stuff, but it was completely full, and the arrangements of the displays was also very interesting.
Yes.
So I decided to focus on this for my practical diploma, and I learned how to use a large 6x6 camera, and I photographed I developed a style of photography and photographed also details and did interviews with this collector about his experience. And it was a bit of entering the world of a certain time and a certain way of seeing things. So it was so this it's a very large book. I think it's 50 by 70, So you can really look into it and see all the details. And there's also a small publication that is inside it and where you can read about a collection of objects from this collection. And we had back then in my university, we had a board, so students can apply with their projects to get funding to publish this project. So I was happy enough and honored to get this funding. So this book was also published through the Institute of Book Arts in this. So it was possible to print it in a small print run with the help of the university.
That was in 2007?
The final publishing was in 2007. I worked on it in 2005, 2006 mainly.
You said there was some complications with your diploma project. Was it something that was related to how you wanted to tackle the project, or was it something, an outside problem that came on your table?
Back then we had one project with Cyan, which was Globalize Me. So we were thinking about globalization from different aspects, about different topics, like population or ecological questions or all kind of questions concerning. And I had an approach. I wanted to make visual information about many different facts, and I took isotype approach. So isotype, you saw some slides in the lecture, but it's a historical way of pictographic depiction of information, and I was trying to work with this, but then I was overwhelmed. I mean, I wrote my theoretical thesis on this, and maybe we can come back to this later. But I was overwhelmed with the amount of data so if you do the design and the design of the pictograms and the design of the research and the translation into graphics, it was a bit overwhelming for me at that time. So I switched the topic. This was basically
the problem that you faced. Okay, that's great. Now, Philipp, let's move into your work life. We got to know you really well as a student and as transitioning from what you initially started studying, then going into design. Let's see some of the work you started after you got educated as a designer.
As I said, at that time, around from starting 2005 maybe, and then going on, the artists from Leipzig were, as the small flyer says, the hottest thing of the time. So I was very lucky that the global art market suddenly focused on painters. No one would have expected this. Painters, but also photographers, a few media artists from Leipzig. And there were a huge exhibition and there are very large galleries. I mean, Neo Rauch is a very famous name, but also David Schnell there are also historical names like Werner Tübke. I mean, these are very famous painters, and it was a bit of a tide of the art market. And in Leipzig, there's a cultural foundation, and they did a small exhibition in a castle near Leipzig in Torgau, and they asked us to do the posters and the invitation and the signage and these things. So this was our Kai Bachmann. He asked me to work with him, and this was the start of our collaboration, which took for a couple of years. Yes.
So this was the first actual practical job you took?
Yes, and as practical jobs are, I mean, we hear this, if we look at the poster, we had the idea of stickers, of labels. So we have a piece of art, an artwork, and we had a bit of the critical idea that made in Leipzig is just a label. Either you put it on it or you are just removing it. So we questioned a bit the concept of this exhibition, and in his introduction speech, the curator of the museum or the curator of this exhibition, he also mentioned that our graphic design perfectly represented his approach. But of course, it was also the experience of time pressure, compromising. So I think if we would have been free we did also a set of postcards which had different artworks on them. So there were many different artists, but then they decided on this one as the main poster. We also, we had to design huge banners for train stations, and then you get to prepare templates, to be very fast in adjusting them, to also the experience of the printing. So the backside here is printed with a neon color, with a special color, and all these tricky things of printing. It was, and then one funny thing was that we put a huge neon sign into this castle, and later learned that this is absolutely forbidden to put neon into this castle. But it was a large opening which was broadcasted on national TV, and it was a good start. Although it's not my favorite work, but it was our first start as designer.
A question could be like, how was the type selection like? What was the factors that led you to choose this typeface and this type layout, this part of being partly a novel, then partly with the style of the grid? What was the factors that made you choose this style of typography and grid in this project?
We went to this castle. It's at the Elbe, I think. It's a large river. It's a beautiful Renaissance city with a very interesting history. And we looked also at the castle, and it was also inspired by the appearance and by the history of this castle and of this city. It comes from a certain time. And so our choice of typeface is Plantin or Plantin, and we changed it a tiny bit. We made the L a bit wider so that everything fits into the sticker. And we found this optical way of partly underlining, partly outlining certain words. And then we had this idea of the sticker. So the front side of the leaflet, the sticker is precisely at the same position as on the back side. So it is, as you turn it around, you read kind of the backstory of this sticker. And we were able to do these compositions with these stickers. These were some ideas of the...
I think it's really nice.
Thank you.
That's great. Okay.
But I remember maybe one funny side story. There's a huge public bank, the Sparkasse in Germany, and they have a specific red. And so of course the print house messed up this specific red, and then this huge sponsor didn't want to pay it, and they had to print everything. It was not so many, and it was not our fault and not our cost, but these things happen.
Human error. It's okay. It happens. Okay. Let's move forward.
Then also supported by this hype of art from Leipzig, there were galleries, especially here, Galerie Kleindienst's gallery. He was a teacher, and we had a very good relationship already during my studies, but he had this small gallery also to support young artists to come to the market. And he asked us to work on small catalogs. And still up to now, there are always young graphic designers who collaborate with the artist for him to do these small catalogs. And this was Sonja Kelberer. She did a weird way of photography. So in her own house, she started building installations or displays or exhibitions, and they got more and more weird and spooky. And so I chose a way of catalog that you can go through normally, and you will see the rather normal rooms that are still recognizable, but then you can also clap it out and the sheet gets much bigger, and you enter a world of kind of nightmarish, huge photography. So it was like a very artistic collaboration. So the artist, liked this idea of the catalog and the concept a lot. I think sometimes the gallery complained a bit that sometimes people had problems to find the way back or
to close them back. So was it in every slide? In every page?
In the end, all the papers were uncut, so it was this cut that you can clap out, and you get bigger and bigger newspapers until you reach these huge images. Yes, I mean, I still like it a lot. There would also be other small of these catalogs that are quite an artistic approach towards graphic design. But then, basically at the same time, or even a bit before, one of our he was a TA when I started studying, now he's a professor, Markus Dresen, and he collaborated with the Museum of Contemporary Art in Leipzig since a long while, and he brought us into this museum to design a catalog. So here we started designing a catalog of their whole collection, and the concept of this catalog was that each time period has a color, and you will always read an introduction to this time period. Then all the artworks are numbered, so you can read through these index numbers and learn more about the artist and how it came to the... And then we have these image plates, which are, for each section there's a section of images. Not all of them are in the catalog, but it was a quite thick catalog. And one of the main ideas was also that it's not binded, but it's only with screws, so that it can grow. So during time,
you add eras, more eras on it. And the colors, they depicted the mood of this era?
We just had a scheme from red to green, so we left some of it open, and we had a nice selection of colors, of kind of a rainbow or kind of a...
And all the colors had the same level of saturation and hue, and they were on the same level.
And on the cover we printed all of them over each other. A lot of spot colors over each other, but it was also an experiment that did not work out perfectly, so later I faked it, to be honest.
Okay. And the typeface selection was?
This was Berthold Akzidenzgrotesk. So it's the book Berthold Akzidenzgrotesk, and we had a special one that also had underlines, and in the catalog we used the light. In the beginning, it was clear to us that it has to be rec typography because it was pretty small and the columns were quite narrow, but we developed this modernist approach and minimal modernist approach of typography and layout. Pretty much rule-based, pretty much straight, but it was, I remember that I was sitting during the years and typesetting like crazy and going through the editing.
There's a lot of layers of type, there's a lot of hierarchy happening in the book. I love the small numbers up on the left, they're really nice. The relationship is really well.
There's a navigation, different kind of navigations. And this soon brought us also closer to this Museum of Contemporary Art Leipzig, and the curators, Barbara Steiner and Heidi Stecker, we won their trust and we started to do exhibition design for this museum.
Yes.
So one of the aims of their policy of exhibition was to contextualize art. So it is really contemporary art that is often from a certain situation, from a certain time, that might not always be immediately accessible. So for the people who know this time, it's pretty much, of course, they can only appreciate the artworks, but often you need a bit of a background or a bit of a context to understand it. So this is the reason why in these exhibitions the like the background information. And here this was one about the founding director of this museum. And here he had, after the breakdown of the wall, after the peaceful revolution, he started convincing collectors to start this museum, and they had a lot of interventions in public space. So here we always depicted the original situation of the artworks, and we showed also pieces of the artworks, and sometimes there are letters. So we contextualized the art in this exhibition design. And here this was another, I made just a few choices of exhibitions. This was non-places, places, and all the artworks have the idea of working with spaces that have a certain history. So yeah, the collection of artworks always shows. And we had the concept to research about the history of this specific building, also contacting people who lived there before and knowing about their stories, knowing where were the windows, where did which person live at which time period. So we put it the whole context or the original architecture and the people who lived there on the floor, on the walls, and the artworks were just over it. So you have a bit of this ghostly atmosphere or this overall idea of the... So you are actually also in a space with a history, and that's also what the artworks are about. Later I will show, there is a villa, an old building and a new building. And usually they did the collection exhibitions in the villa, in the old building, and they did contemporary exhibitions, more curated exhibitions in the new building. So here we, for example, here we come to the new building. I will also show a view from the outside, but it's a mobile, interactive architecture, quite contemporary architecture. And this, so they started here a project with many collaborators, and it was called Carte Blanche Friendly Enemies. And it was together with museums, with corporations, with private collectors, with gallerists, with all stakeholders in the art market. And they were questioning how the art market really functions. And so this was the initial exhibition where we put it a kind of conspiracy theory on all the walls, all throughout the exhibition, behind the artworks, where you can see the confrontation, the compromises of money, of exhibitions, of public-private partnership. And so you get an idea of the depth of the topic. And then there was like each 2 months was a new exhibition. And in the end, all of this content, it was a research project, and it was collected in a book. And it's called The Captured Museum. And here we, for example, we have the collaboration with the newspaper. So we went to their ceiling room, to their boardroom, and we took a photograph of the boardroom where they make the decision for their art prize. Or this is a couple of private collectors, and here we displayed it more in a way of a private room, if you have artworks at your home. Or here this was a gallery with an interesting artist who had very technical, so these are drops, water drops that are connected to the internet, and it automatically collects certain code words and puts them as typography from these water drops, so high-tech, very interesting.
That was in 2011?
Yes, the artist is Julius Popp, and he always had really interesting, very technical, very intelligent artworks. It's very interesting.
Where was this displayed?
Also in this museum.
Everything you just said was all in the same museum?
This series of exhibition, they were all in this same building, yes. And then there was here, this was from a corporation, a gas supplier, and they supported a collection of photography. And here it shows, the title is East for the Record, and it shows the peaceful revolution or the beginning of the peaceful revolution, and then show, you can. It was a very interesting exhibition that was later also shown throughout the country in many different places, and we developed a certain like programmed systems of how to lay out the photographs, and also a bit for the catalog. It was very interesting. This was a bank, and they actually had a meeting in the art space. Was also, so all these backgrounds are more or less fake, or photographs on the wall, and they actually had a meeting there. And this is like the structure of the whole catalog, with a certain idea of typography, that's where spaces are fighting, or blocks of text or images are fighting for the space, and different interests. And the ending part was here the press review with newspaper layout. A lot of.
That looks really good.
Yeah, so at that time we were doing the flyers for this museum. Then these catalogs were more of a long period work, and then every 2 months or something exhibition. So it was a interesting collaboration.
And what was your main role in the whole project? Were you in the exhibition more, or in the catalog more, or you were involved in the both?
Not all of these displays we were protagonists, or some of them were also done by other people, but most of the exhibitions we developed together with the collaborator, the idea of the display, and sometimes also other material for the exhibition, like booklets, papers, all these things for the exhibition. Then the flyers for these exhibitions, then the general work on the catalog, but also the concept of the catalog, all these things. I mean, here I collaborated with Markus Dresen and Kai Bachmann. Maybe we could say Markus is a bit of a senior. He was a bit of a senior, but basically we did the larger decisions all together.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, in the exhibition design, sometimes Kai a bit more, but we work together. The bad side of collaborating is that sometimes you cannot exactly say who came up with this idea, and or who came up with the right idea first, or whatever. But we collaborated together.
And the color green, where did it come from?
Which one?
The color green, the green color.
We had it in from the beginning. So also on the initial flyer I had this color. I think it was a bit poisonous, I think. We used this reading thread with, and on this reading thread you have all the partners stitched into this thread, and then we used it here only on some pages as a special color. I think it came from a bit between interesting and poisonous or something like this.
Okay, that's nice. And all the catalog was based on the three column grid, except the parts where the type were fighting.
It was a pretty much complex grid. It allowed for, on the top part where all the typography moves into the text, and also the images sometimes move into the text, there are, I guess it was 12 columns. Okay. And then also here in the interview part, there's a certain play between the different texts. So I think it was, in the end, it was a 12-column grid, and then we had always this idea of shifting into it.
And the size of the catalog, was it A4?
17 by 24.
It was in the middle between.
Quite often use this. It's a very economical size, which is for scientific books or for these kind of books. It's large enough to show the images in a good size, and maybe we could go also a bit more commercial, or a bit more corporate, or these kind of projects.
Okay.
So I think in 2009 I started, so soon after I graduated, I started working for a Forum Franco-Allemand des Jeunes Artistes, or Young German-French Forum of Arts, and they were sitting in close to where I grew up in Bayreuth, and they were organizing workshops, but each year they were also organizing a philharmonic orchestra with French and German and other students basically from all over Europe or all over the world, and they were having these concerts, a tour of concerts through Germany, sometimes Czechoslovakia, sometimes Hungary. And I did these posters. I also did the logo for this forum logo, where two meet and then they come together. And of course, here it was about classic orchestra music, so it is a certain audience that I tried to, and I wanted to make clear on the first look, this is about classical music. So it's maybe from the design, it's a bit constructed and a bit conservative. But I was very happy the left one went to Paris, and the director of this church or concert hall or whatever, they told me that he really liked the poster and understood it immediately. So I tried here to visualize the main part of this concert. It's like dum 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 dum, and then there's a spiral that spirals out of, and I think he understood it. And so to communicate without language, that was also really nice. Very interesting. And this was a later poster from the same series. So here I started to collaborate with Florian Lamm. They are now Lamm-Kirch. They are a quite successful graphic design studio, and I will give you the link. But here we collaborated on this a bit renewed poster series. Yeah, so this was for the forum. Maybe basically, I think when we talked, I tried to have also smaller clients whom I could work with each month. So this is, for example, a gallery. There were many galleries, and she asked me to design a logo and to design a series of flyers and these things, and a website and signage for her gallery. And so these were small jobs. I developed a system, very simple, and each month she would give me the information and one image. I would edit the image, I would make the typography, the detailed typography, send it out, and I do it in a couple of hours. And I had quite a lot of these smaller clients. Yes, and I think it was a fair collaboration. Or this one here was for a barbecue garden. Yes. So they opened a restaurant in an interesting architecture. It was a former factory and now not de-industrialized. And so I was inspired by these barbecue ovens. So I designed the logo as this oven, and also the typefaces. I mean, they are not very high-skilled typography, but I think I still like them. They are quite simple sign painters typefaces, and so this garden has a voice with these typefaces, and I designed also a signage with a certain kind of illustration, a certain language of illustrations for the menu, for the signage, for matchboxes, for posters, a certain color scheme, and also the posters for events. And here I designed the poster in a way so that it fits together, so that you can also hang a lot of posters to give a whole wallpaper. And this was a series of posters for different events or each summer. Yes. And I think this is one of the designs that I'm most happy with, because you can tell small stories. There are so many small details in these posters. Here we did also a series of posters, and they were built on a hexagonal grid, so with certain angles and very precisely. and I used like spot colors, like the CMYK brightest colors. So this is why they have such a vibrant colors, and the same for the other one. And so the next project started because there was a grocery shop or a storage for a grocery producer, and he's also small here in the poster, and he liked the poster so much and wanted a copy. And actually on my birthday he sent me an email asking me if I want to develop his corporate design. And yeah, so his name is Thilo Egenberger, and I think also his parents or his grandparents also had a grocery shop, so there was a certain legacy, certain historic examples, and he showed me how he imagined the typeface to be. So I designed a typeface. It's a bit close to Futura, but it also has a twist that has a bit of the 20s or a bit of a certain aura, a certain time of typography. On the left we see his products, so he produces lemonades, but also other many different drinks, coffee, marmalade, jam, all kind of grocery. And he produces this locally, ecologically. But it was many people liked it a lot. So you would see it all around. It was a bit hip. And he liked to collaborate with artists. So also these labels here were done by Christoph Ruckerberle, a graphic artist. Yeah, and he wanted a logo, and after I designed the typeface, I tried around with his initial letters, and I came up with the squirrel, because the concept of the squirrel is that it collects grocery, it stores grocery, and then it gives further grocery. So, and they also, I mean, his wife, Julia, she also liked squirrels so much, so they were immediately convinced of this idea. So basically I fine-tuned one outline version for if you have a larger distance and a filled version. And then we also, it was a very good collaboration, I have to say. So he really knew what he wanted, and we discussed it a lot, and he had high demands on quality. And yeah, he wanted a very specific kind of blue, and this is for his box. So we would see them in the supermarket all over now. Or then for his storage room, I did the design for his storage. So you would see this from a huge distance. People passing by would see this huge poster of him. He also needed like stationery and all this kind of stuff. So this had to be very practical. But he really knew what he wanted, and once you achieved what he wanted, it was also fine with him. So this was good in the collaboration, and also on the labels of each lemonade, you need small information and all of these kinds of things. So it's also like a repeating job. And what maybe for the collaboration with a client, there is like a union of designers in Germany, and they have a certain pricing strategy. So they suggest a certain pricing strategy, and basically it's time frame, regional spreading, time spreading. So in which area do you want to use it as a client? How long do you want to use it? How much do you want to print? And according to these factors, you have a time salary, like 1 hour is this and this, but also a factor that says if you grow, if you want to use this worldwide, then you owe me additionally. And I discussed this with him, and he agreed on this. I mean, it was fair for him. He's local. It's only basically in the city. And then after the time frame ended, he also approached me and asked me for another bill. To give me more money, because so I think he was a very fair client, and it was a good arrangement, and it was a good collaboration. So now if you look at his website, you will basically only find the squirrel, so it developed into a strong sign. Here we see Thilo and Julia and photographed in front of their storage room, and we still have a good, I mean, I gave this job later to another design studio when I went to Cairo. So now it's still running quite good, I hope.
Yes.
So it's maybe here it was another corporate design. So this museum got a new director. And usually if museums get a new director, they also want to change the corporate design. And so in a team with Kai Bachmann, Markus Dresen and Annalena von Helldorf, so with some of the designers who worked there for a long time, we proposed a new graphic design. And this, I have to say, was a rather long and challenging process. So for us, it was not always clear what she really wanted, in which direction she wanted to go. I think she also sometimes changed her mind, and this was, so this is a bit draining. It was a bit draining, this process. But in the end, we came up with a quite straightforward modernist design inspired by Massimo Vignelli for the New York Underground, or Experimental Jet Set, or quite with a bit of a unique typeface, with a certain color range, with certain angles, with a certain kind of typography, and yeah, it's still in use for the web page, for the signage and all these things. So I think when I came back this summer and saw it, I said, alhamdulillah, it looks good and it's still in use. It's good, but it was a bit of a tougher process with the client here.
Of course. It's a big project. It's not something small, and it's always hard to see your project go through time. It's really hard, عشان a lot of people work on it, and it's kind of niche. The exposure it has, it's for some people, certain people. It has its own time. It lives on its own timeline, and when other people interact with it, it's really scary that something might go wrong and stuff. But I think it's really nice. It's a good project, yeah. And I think you worked with this team before on the other projects.
Yes, and maybe this can be a good bridge to the next project. So aside from these commercial, corporate, and also the exhibition, I also worked with other designers on self-initiated exhibitions. So here, additionally to the team that I mentioned before, there's Jakob and Pascal. And here we did an exhibition. So in Leipzig, there's a book fair, and many people from all over the world come on a few days to Leipzig, to the book fair. And inside the city, we displayed contemporary graphic design from Leipzig. And yeah, it was a hugely successful exhibition. So many people came to the art club. It's a club for, usually they display contemporary art, but here they displayed graphic design, and we had an interesting order. So we put all the books on one diagonal long table, ordered according to their size. Then we had all the flyers and small visiting cards and these things also ordered according to size on a huge on a huge cabinet, and all the posters on the walls. And then we had some extra for this exhibition. We did some black and white posters as statements on another wall. Yes. It was a very nice display. It was a very nice collaboration. And yeah, so this is one thing I learned from these things. We did similar things before, that a scene of graphic designers also has to show itself to the outside, so that people appreciate and know there are a lot of good graphic designers, and it's something that is, and it's, of course, this is also a contact where people would see your work, and so I mean, I really appreciate also what you do here now. It's something so that you show graphic design and that you look a bit what is behind graphic design.
Yes.
So this was also the idea here.
I think it's really amazing. Is it still there? Well, it was for some period of time as an exhibition.
This year was for a very short period of time. Then we had friends from Luzern in Switzerland. They do this Welt format. Maybe you saw them on Instagram. Yes. It's really interesting. So in Luzern, they have also a very active graphic design scene. And here we showed our work together from the people from Luzern and from the people from Leipzig. And yeah, also the same idea of display. Here it worked very good because the Swiss formats are a bit different. So it automatically ordered the Swiss work and the German work on different places. And yeah, here you can see some of the works. It was also for a couple of weeks. Huh? Yeah,
It's really nice.
And this was together with Felix and Mattis Pfeffli. Maybe you know Mattis Pfeffli. He has this Feixen.com. So he's also, I will also give the link to his work. He has amazing work.
We will check him out.
Okay, then maybe one more self-initiated work. I was researching about this isotype that I mentioned before. So in my diploma and also before in this Globalize Me, I researched and tried to write my thesis about this isotype movement. And I read that there was a museum of war economy in Leipzig by this Otto Neurath, by this scientists who later designed this sign language. And so I wanted to know more about this, and I went to the archives and to the libraries and did a research what was actually this museum. And yeah, I tried to access these old files, and I found out that it was in a specific famous building. And here I researched the floor plan of this museum, what they displayed in this museum. I made a small publication about the description of this museum. And yeah, it was like a bench in an art exhibition. The context was, it was a room of presence. So this is a famous avant-garde exhibition display by Moholy Hodge. Yeah, but it was in the context of an art exhibition and it was a bit of a research design. And later this was presented in a colloquium or in a conference about information design also by the Bauhaus Dessau. So here.
Do you do the copywriting for the small publications you do, or you work with copywriters?
This was the content of this small publication was basically the catalog of the old original exhibition. So I typed the whole catalog and several of these catalogs, and then basically I reprinted them for people to understand. But it's a precise description of what they showed and why they showed it. So here in this case, I did no copywriting. But it's also a tough topic.
But see, you don't do copywriting if something self-initiated and you want to do it for yourself. You work with a copywriter, or you try it out as writing it out yourself?
I mean, usually I worked with curators or with writers and translators. We will see also examples of editing content, and then in the editing there are parts of copywriting, but I prefer to have it separated.
Yes.
It sometimes gets overwhelming if you do copywriting and design and correcting. So it is healthy to have different roles in this process.
Okay.
And maybe just to wrap my Leipzig time up, maybe I have only 2 more publications. So this is editorial design. So here I worked with Florian Lamm again, and I will give you his access to his website, and they are also really good designers. But here we worked on workers' photography, the eye of the worker, and it combines early photography with a catalog of one specific Bauhaus photographer. And maybe I can briefly guide through this catalog. These are the film, the actual camera film, and it's like the copy of this film. So you enter the book kind of in a movie. You go with the photographer, clicking through demonstrations, sports activities, through this time, and then we get into the book with different articles of this book, and then here we decided to divide image plates from typographic pages. So we have this collection of image pages. Then we have the catalog of this photographer, and we also dive into contemporary life of that time. And here's an overview of the whole book, with also a part with a painting and a part with small, so like the whole work of this photographer, different aspects of this topic.
Okay.
And basically, I mean, these things usually are published in a scientific context in universities, and then also the layout of the book is debatable. And so here with good designers, with an editor that was interested in this project, with a good publishing house, Spectre Books, it's possible to get this also more to the public, to get these topics out. And there were, and this Spectre Books, maybe I give you also the address later. It was a project by Markus, the one that who was a teaching assistant in the beginning, is now a professor, and he started his own publishing house, and they are very successful. So, of course, there's always the idea of the end of print and what is the book, but they have a publishing house, they do high quality, also graphic design, but also topics of books, and they are very, very successful globally and distribute their books very good.
Now let's get into when you came to Egypt. What would you like to start with?
In 2014, I was approached by Rayan Abdullah, the founding dean of our factory of the Faculty of Applied Science and Arts at the GUC. He was my professor for 1 year in typography in Leipzig. And so he knew my work in the teaching in the academy in Leipzig, and he encountered me a couple of times, if I can imagine, to go to Cairo. So he was a bit headhunting, and I found also an email asking me, do you want to go in 1 week or something like this? And then it was a quick decision. Okay, this time I do it for half a year or something, 1 semester, 3 months, something like this. I spent some time in Cairo. And I really liked the experience, the teaching experience with the students, also the faculty. And then I decided to stay a bit longer and made a 3 years contract. And after some time, I was approached by Ahmed Sakfelheit. He was the head of department back then, to design a pre-master advanced design projects catalog for the faculty for all 3 departments: graphic design, product design, and media design. And this was my first challenge to work with Arabic typography. And it was an interesting experience.
I will just want to ask you a question. Let's get into the feeling you had. You had to travel from where you were to Egypt to educate foreign people. They're not from the same country that you are from. What was the feeling when you were encountered by the GUC that you could be an educator there? How did you feel, and why did he say yes? Why did you want to come?
I mean, Rayan is a good, he convinced me in the end, and basically, I mean, of course, I had my mental map or my, not prejudices, but your imagination of another country. I mean, before I went to Argentina 1 time, but other than that, I never left Europe. I was never on the African continent. So it was, of course, it was a surprise, but I was always interested, I have to say, in Arab culture, and so I was looking forward. And when I came to the GUC, of course, when I left the airport, it was the air and the heat and these things.
Yes.
And but soon I met colleagues in my apartment, and my first experience with students. I mean, there are some things that are very similar, some things that are quite different, but I mean, in general, everyone was polite and it was a good experience. So I liked it, and yeah.
Okay, that's nice. Let's go forward into the project you were talking about for the pre-masters.
Yeah, so I mean, I took also courses in Arabic calligraphy with El Mahdi. Maybe you know him. And yeah, since I studied calligraphy also in Leipzig, I mean Latin calligraphy, I think, yeah, I have a bit of the patience of the hand to do it a bit. And so I learned also a bit about Arabic calligraphy and a bit about Arabic typography. And yeah, here in this is the result of this catalog. It took quite a while. I also did a lot of the editing, a lot of the management and all these things. Yeah, I was also inspired by Helmi El-Tuni covers. So for example, these kind of shop windows. Then I researched also about a certain form algorithm. This was, I mean, the pattern. It has, I had a certain algorithm that sometimes I show to my students where you can create endless combination of patterns. And so this was printed with very bright colors. And here I also used it to depict, to have a view into some of the works that you might find in this catalog. And of course, there's a reference to Islamic ornaments or patterns, but also to a present. So we wrote, this is a present to the public from the GOC. And yeah, here Ahmed wanted me to have it bilingual or Bi-Scriptual. So I had to combine Arabic and English. And yeah, I took this approach that it's always to the center. Also in this one, we always have the center, the top, the bottom. So a very strict division of the page. And I took, for example, always the left side for the Arabic title, going up to the Arabic text. And then the Latin title going down, Latin. And the whole book is built on this center perspective. And yeah, if we look through the whole catalog, also in the center of the book, you find also this center idea, and you can read this book from both sides. So it starts Arabic from one side, Latin from the other side. And yeah, basically it shows works of the students. It's printed in blue because they had the topic of water at that time. It was a bit of a loose topic. We were not able to write it on the cover, but the color was inspired by these things. And yeah, it was difficult experience was that I did not know that to master Arabic language in script is not everyone is common with writing standard Arabic. So it was a bit of a tough process for me to learn that I can hardly get these translations.
And how much time did the whole project take place?
I think it was published finally in 2017. I think 2016, 15, 16, I started to collect the material. Yeah, the material was very diverse in quality. I think it took quite a long time. I gave it as an assignment for each colleague to translate 5 texts. And when I came back, I found that the language is not possible to print, and there were certain delays. There were several delays. It took quite a lot of time.
Okay.
Maybe the next project, some people know, or it's more commonly known. This was the Meya Meya project.
Yes.
It was started when I came in 2015. Colleagues came up with the idea, or in the circle of colleagues, we discussed the idea of exposing, highlighting, displaying Arabic, also documenting Arabic graphic design more as to get more attention on graphic design. Maybe this is a thread that similar what we did before also in Leipzig or in Luzern, and also to document it and to also give good resources to the students as good examples of design and from different regions from the whole Arab world, or basically from everyone who works with Arabic typography.
Yes.
Or calligraphy.
Okay.
And this, the team was, in the first round, it was another team of colleagues. There was also Ahmed, and Jochen was there from the beginning, Darius, Regina. And for the second round, they asked me to take over mainly also the layout supervision. Rakhta Mortas was assigned to develop the new round graphic design system. And I was more or less the supervisor mainly of the catalog, also later for the conference. And maybe we can take a look into the catalog. We decided to, there's the new round.
Yes.
Yes, this one I don't have on my screen. It's not photographed properly yet, but yes, there are also, the new round was this year, and it was just, it still smells.
It's still new.
So it was also the third round was very nice. Here on the screen I only have the second round.
Okay.
And we decided to be quite true to the very DNA of the graphic design, of the corporate design. The corporate design was developed by pre-master students. Mirna, a group of students from the previous round have the copyright, so to say, on the logo and on the name Meya Meya, but we are entitled to use it for further rounds.
And the logo is lettering, صح? It's not a typeface.
No, it's not a typeface. Yes, okay. They were. I mean, here in this catalog here, Mirna was also writing about the process, how they came up with this logo. They were inspired by the city, by the posters in the city, also by this Meya Meya expression, and they decided to have this very bold street.
And all posters for movie style for the logo. Okay.
But of course, the advantage in this case, it also is readable in both scripts. Huh? So you can read it from Latin and from Arabic, and it works perfectly. So this was like the philosophy of the 100 Best Arabic Posters Award. And then this is the contributions. So each round we get more and more submissions. So here we had 1,500, and in the third round we had far over 2,000. And we can see the countries, from the whole Arab region, many either diaspora Arabic designers or people from Europe or the Americas who work with Arabic script. And we can also see the time, and these are the statistics. And there are a lot of very interesting examples, and I think it's very useful that all these things are documented also in a catalog.
As a visual research, we can say.
And they are in libraries in different universities, at least in the Arab world, but also outside of the Arab world. And I think they are important.
And who are the judges?
So in this round here, in the third round, it was Ain, so Omar and Josef, then Tarek Atrisi from Lebanon, then Salem Al-Qasimi from Sharjah, he was teaching in Sharjah, then Amro Thabit from Cairo, and Amina from Tunisia.
Okay.
So I'm not sure about the judges from the first round, but we try in selecting the judges to have all made from different Arab countries, people who are either involved also in teaching design or who are generally accepted professionals. And I think it was a very good jury here. And here we also had, in the catalog, we also find interviews with the judges. I think that's also interesting reference also in the future about development of design in the Arab world. Yeah. And in the third round, we were very proud to have Wael Morkos from
Yes, I
Lebanon.
know,
And
type designer.
yes, type and amazing designer. Then we had Shenawi from Cairo. He's living in Belgium now. He's a comic artist. Then we had Möbius Design Studio from the Emirates. Mohammed Sharaf from Kuwait. And yeah, that's it.
And they all collaborated. It's a collaboration or it's paid partnership?
I mean, the process is that we get all these over 2,000 digital files. Then inside we make a first quality check, like very roughly. I mean, I think everyone can trust that we would not sort out anything that is
Controversial, maybe.
Of course, we have to also look for things that cannot be displayed in public space. But these are, I mean, basically it's minimum or a certain level of quality that is generally accepted, and then topics that would be too controversial. But I'm fine with this choice. We have to imagine that there's a series of exhibitions also in different cultures, and also in the United Arab Emirates, of course in Egypt, in different areas with different
audiences.
Also with different policies of what you can exhibit in public space, and so we have to consider this a bit.
Yes, of course. I just want to ask you a question. It's a bit of a hard question. What's your favorite volume of Maya? The one the closest to your heart?
The second one.
The second one? The first one you worked on?
No, the second one. I worked on the second one, on the third one. The first one, I think I like it graphically very much, but I have problems with some of the texts, and there are some things that in the printing, in the production, like small things that I don't like so much. It was the first round, and it's a super powerful graphic design, and generally it was, the others here, basically they worked in this legacy of the first one, so I appreciate the first one very much. I think here with the interviews also, so I like this one as a round thing very much.
It's the whole package, yeah.
As the whole package, and I think you can really read this, you get a lot of information, you have references to all the designers. You also have the references here. Unfortunately, here due to COVID and to all the delays of COVID, it was not possible to include the interviews in this one. So we already did the interviews and they were very interesting, but unfortunately it was not possible in the time frame to edit and translate them for this catalog.
Okay. Let's move to the next topic you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, from the many interesting projects that students did in the courses or in the bachelor works, I have to highlight one project. This was Rakta. Many people know it, so maybe we go through it pretty fast. But this project, after her presentation, NG Ali was in the committee and other people were in the committee, and they said you have to publish this. And so Rakta did an internship in Germany, and she went to Amsterdam to talk to Khat Books. I will also put, everybody, I guess most people know Khat Books, but she visited Huda and Edo and presented her project, and they quite immediately said, yes, we help you publishing this. And this was the beginning of a long process for Rakta and me as a supervisor, mainly for Rakta, of course, to go through, to make this smaller, to shrink it in volume, to go into every detail of text, of typography, of image editing, the whole process to get out a really nice publication that is out in the market. And I think it's also a very good resource and document for Egyptian designers to look into local vernacular designs and a bit of the contemporary or history of public graphic design. Yeah, we still think that it's important to have exhibitions, catalogs, but also magazines about design, not only as a resource for designers, but also to make this accessible for other people or to show to other people. Of course, there are digital channels, so this also has a website, which make it also easier. But I'm in an age where I saw many technologies come and go. So in my experience, the risk of the digital realm is that at a certain point it's not accessible anymore.
Yes.
So I still believe that printed magazines or books also have a right.
Have a certain part in your heart. Some piece of advice based on your experience as a designer for this long time.
Yeah, I think these, I definitely should put here also Wael Morcos or these judges from the Meya. And I think these very successful Arab designers have also a very good understanding of Arabic typography and Tariq Adrisi. So they have this also on a global scale as an extra skill, and they do also large exhibitions, catalogs in the Gulf area or so I think this heritage and the knowledge of specifically Arabic is also very important. At least the skill of lettering, a logo, or even a type design for the simple purposes that I showed here, maybe not as a fully equipped type designer like Pascal Sochbi or Wael Morcos or Christian Sarkis, but as a knowledge to work with Arabic script. I think this is an important extra value that, of course, sets you in a position on a market where they would ask you and they cannot easily ask a designer from another region.
Is there any book recommendations for exhibition design you could maybe advise people that want to go to want to take their expertise or want to start into the exhibition design industry to read, and also in the editorial designs? And what are some books that really helped you in these two sides, as an exhibition designer and as a editorial side of the designer?
It's a bit. I can put the references on a separate reference sheet. For me, there's a book, The Power of Display. It's a bit theoretical, so it's not a
visual book.
It's not a coffee table book or a book that with a lot of fancy exhibition designs, but it's a history of the display of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and also going back to avant-garde, and it's very interesting theoretically about how different strategies of contextualizing art or different kinds of exhibitions like shops or mall displays, or how they are related to art displays. So this book, I have a PDF, so I can at least give you the PDF. I don't know if it's available online or... So this was a very interesting book on exhibition design. In editorial design, I like very much Hyphen Press. It's a British publishing house, and he has Swiss designers and the history of typography. So these are very interesting books. There are a lot of good books about editorial design. I will try to figure out a nice list of
We could put the links for these books on the comments in the video, so everyone that sees the video could access where to buy these books or where the books are available online. That could be a good insight for the people that are watching this video. That was an amazing talk. Thank you, Philipp.
Thank you.
We are very happy that you could join us today. I think we talked about some really insightful information that could help young designers develop more and find more value in their work. And as we said, we're going to put all the links about everything we talked about in the comments. Check them out. And thank you so much. I'm very happy that you could make it.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much.